Villains who are pure evil are some of the best antagonists to ever be put on screen and on paper, and have created some of the most iconic moments in movies, TV shows, and in books. Yet we don't get to see them that often like we used to. Back in the day, we used to see so many cartoonishly evil villains whose goal was only to just wreak havoc in the world. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my complex villains like a Thanos, like a Walter White, like a Darth Vader, and like a Killmonger. But seeing a villain who can't be reasoned with no matter what you try to say to them is a feeling that a complex villain can't give you. Because these pure evil villains only want one thing and one thing only: to see pure destruction. Or how Alfred put it,
some men just want to watch the world burn.
Now, even though we don't get these types of villain anymore because people want complex villains, but we still see them very prominent in comic book movies. Since we have these heroes who embody pure good and pure hope in the world, it would only make sense to have their yin to the yang, creating a dynamic we all love, pure good versus pure evil. It would only make sense that that dynamic would stand the test of time in mainly comic book movies. And these pure evil villains are mainly found in legacy characters like the Batman, like Spider-Man's, and like the Flash's Rogues Gallery. They always had these terrifying pure evil villains from their past that have stood the test of time because of how iconic they are and how great of a villain they are, and we all love them and we all know these iconic villains. And I want to talk about a certain 3 villains who represent the idea of pure evil villainy the most. And I personally like to call them the big 3 of villainy. Starting off with the most iconic one of them all, the Joker, otherwise known as the Crime Prince of Gotham, is one of Batman's most iconic villains and just an iconic villain in general, who has done some of the most horrific acts in all of fiction. To torturing the boy Wonder for days, then beating him to death with a crowbar, to paralyzing Barbara Gordon in The Killing Joke, to tricking Superman to kill his own wife, causing the Injustice timeline, or how in The Dark Knight, Joker tricks the Batman to save Harvey Dent instead of Rachel, and for the worst one, giving us Jared Leto's Joker, which might just be the most evil deed he has done yet. But jokes aside, that's just some of his most notable villainous acts. He has so many I can list, I could be talking about it for days. But what takes him to a whole nother tier of pure villainy is just how petty he is in his normal day. Like in the Batman animated series, where he tortured and watched a guy squirm for just cutting him off in the road. Where he drove a man insane by just asking him, "You will have to repay me one favor, and I'll call you when I need that one favor." And that guy goes so insane that he leaves the city of Gotham, changes his name, tries to get as far away from the Joker as possible. But Joker, being such an evil villain, he watches him every single day for years and years and years, just so he can always wait to ask for that one favor when he least expects it, because at the end of the day, he only wants to see this man squirm for no reason at all, just so he can get a good laugh. Or how in Batman Beyond, he put a microchip in Robin's head just so he can come back from the dead and continue to make Batman's life a living hell. And recently, even though we've seen the release of stuff like the Joker, who tried to make him more understandable by copying a certain story that we know, or how in recent comics and in certain comics, trying to give a more tragic backstory for a reason to why he becomes this insane psychopathic character, where if you just have one bad day, you could end up like the Joker. And even though these are solid stories, and I like some of these stories that have been told with the tragic Joker type of story, it kind of takes away to what makes him such a great villain in the first place by making him just an agent of chaos who's always just trying to cause the most nefarious acts of all of fiction with a smile on his face. So it doesn't really matter how he got there or how tragic his backstory is. At the end of the day, we kind of want to just see the Joker be the pure evil villain he is. Because even though the Joker is not some complex villain that the comics and movies are trying to make him out to be, because what makes him so complex and what makes him such a great antagonist to Batman is that the complexity of him doesn't come from the Joker as a character. The complexity comes from the dynamic he causes with the Batman, pushing his moral agenda to its breaking point. To where we get stories like The Killing Joke, where he finally reaches that breaking point, or we see stories where Batman is at the edge of the line, but he will never cross that line, because if he ever did, he would never come back from it. Because in all accounts, We all know Joker is beyond saving. There's no way that Joker can be saved. We all know he's gonna escape from Arkham. He's gonna cause some more nefarious acts. He's gonna blow up a town. He's gonna create so many havoc in Gotham City. And we know Batman would just completely be in a cycle of him putting him in Arkham Asylum, him breaking out, and do it all over again. So Batman has every right to, just snap his neck or just murder him. But we all know if he crosses that line, he will never come back. And that's the reason what makes him such a great villain. Not because he's a complex villain, is because he makes Batman that much more complex of a protagonist by creating this agent of chaos. Because Batman knows that if he ever kills the Joker, he'll never be the hero who's trying to protect that scared little kid in the alley that he once was. He will no longer be the Batman. But even though we all know how great the Joker is, let's talk about Spider-Man's Joker, the Green Goblin, which is pretty much the face of all menaces when it comes to movie appearances, when it comes to him laughing in front of Spider-Man's face while taking his punches in No Way Home, to him being a menace in the original Spider-Man movies, with Willem Dafoe embodying the pure villainy that he is, with his dueling personalities having a Jekyll and Hyde situation. He is just pure evil and a pure menace once he puts on that Green Goblin mask. Some of the most nefarious acts have happened when he's on the pages of a comic book or when he's on screen. Acts like killing Gwen Stacy in the comics, which is just a huge moment in Spider-Man comics and a huge moment in Spider-Man history. And even Green Goblin in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is pretty much a sorry Green Goblin, which is a watered down Walmart version of the Green Goblin we got in the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, he still was a menace, killing Gwen Stacy in his first appearance and having one of the most gruesome and kind of body horror transformation scene we have ever gotten in comic book movie history, which was apparently toned down for the film's release, and it was apparently way worse in the original cut, which I would have loved to see, and I don't know if we will ever get that, but one can only hope, and I would have loved to see how much more gross and body horror it could have gotten. But what else would you expect from a white guy who has waves? There's also so many moments in the comics of Green Goblin doing some nefarious acts in the comics for no reasons, like drugging his own son, or like having so many other people take the blame for being the Green Goblin. Even though the Green Goblin is similar to the Joker with all the crazy things he does, what separates the two is that, unlike Batman knowing that the Joker is beyond saving, and in Spider-Man's eyes, there's still something to be saved in the Green Goblin. And the Green Goblin is not beyond saving in Spider-Man's eyes. What makes Green Goblin such a great pure evil villain is that the Green Goblin is just another side of a man who is a normal person, although mean, a normal man who is a great father figure to Peter, who is a well-respected businessman, who is the father of Spider-Man's best friend. But at the same time, we as a reader or as Spider-Man don't know what's the real Norman Osborn, or if Norman Osborn is still even alive in the Green Goblin's body. Maybe he's fully corrupted by the Goblin serum, or maybe there's still a piece of Norman Osborn left, and Peter wants to know that he can still save that little piece Norman Osborn has left in his own body. Because there is a dynamic with Green Goblin and Norman Osborn present, that once he puts that mask on, he's a whole different person and is just pretending to be human and using Norman Osborn's face as a mask to do his evil villainy, or if it's Norman Osborn who is having these lapses in his mind that takes him to the point where he becomes the Green Goblin, but deep down inside he's still Norman Osborn. A moment that encapsulates this idea is in the end of Spider-Man 1, when we see all these moments of Green Goblin being such a menace, and he seems beyond saving at the end of the movie. But just when he's about to die, we still see an ounce of Norman Osborn left.
Peter, don't tell Harry.
Which makes you really think, should he have died here? Was he really beyond saving? Or maybe that was just the Green Goblin trying to get one last laugh off to ultimately put smoke in Peter's head just for one last laugh. But one villain, the last villain I'll be talking about, who might take the cake for the biggest villain, the biggest op, the biggest pure menace of all villains of all time, who just wants to see the world burn and see one certain character burn, even if it costs him his own life. And that character is none other than the Reverse Flash,
Barry.
otherwise known as Professor Zoom, is the biggest menace of all time. Unlike the other big two, where I can name a few good deeds they have done in some instances in their comics and some other variations they have, the Reverse Flash has never had a remotely good thought in his life. If you are unfamiliar with his backstory, he is pretty much a man in the future who got obsessed with the Flash, so much so that he is his #1 fan at one point, and then found out he was destined to become Flash's greatest villain, so much that it drove him to become mad. Instead of changing that future, he accepted it and his own twisted way, making Flash's life a living hell, is the tension he always wanted as being Flash's biggest fan. But that's generally how his backstory goes. Obviously, there's many different versions of his backstory, but that's kind of just the base outline. So the idea is he's Flash's biggest fan, then became Flash's biggest hater in a twisted, ironic way. Unlike the Joker or the Green Goblin, who can try to kill their heroes, Reverse Flash can't actually kill his protagonist, the Flash, or really stop him from being the Flash in general. The reason being is that the reason he becomes the Reverse Flash is because the Flash exists in the past. So him going back in the past and interrupting him and trying to kill him would realistically create a paradox, killing himself in the future. Or at least not becoming the person he is in the future. Which is why he's called the Living Paradox. Because even though he can't kill the Flash, he could still mess with the Flash. Because for any other villain, not being able to kill your own protagonist would be a pretty much biggest issue of being a villain. But for Reverse Flash, he sees this as an opportunity to be more evil. Since he can't kill him, he will just kill his mom when he's still a child and frame his dad, influence him to create the Flashpoint, and just make his life a living hell by doing some of the most petty and worst things imaginable. Like untying his shoes to make him trip multiple times when he's young, just so he can get humiliated by his classmates. Making sure he grows up without any friends. The way he stops him from making friends is either by, making him trip and making him look dumb in front of all his classmates so he can be made fun of, or if he even makes a friends, he would just wipe them out of existence. And there's times when he's killed everyone he loves. Like when he turned one of Barry's love interests to a vegetable by shaking them with super speed, making them brain dead, which is just the incarnate of villainy. There are so many crimes that he's done that if you can think of a crime, he has probably done it. Now you might be thinking, well, this villain sounds like he's a huge problem. Why didn't the Flash just kill him? Well, the worst part of it is that he can't actually die because he is a living paradox, which means that if you kill one version of him, one in the future will just come back to take his place, making him one of the biggest menaces of all time and is one of Flash's most iconic villains. And he has become so iconic, in fact, that he's also been put into other stories where he kills other superheroes, like when he takes down the Justice League by himself, because he is that powerful. Also being in one of the greatest animated superhero movies of all time, Justice League Flashpoint. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. An amazing movie. Also has some great memes that have spawned from it. But what makes him such a great villain is that even though he can push the Flash down the stairs when he's a kid and he can't do anything about it and just make his life pure misery in all aspects, it makes it that much more impactful when you see the Flash actually succeed. Because Barry's life was made a living hell of his own doing because he was a superhero. So because Barry was a good person and because he was the Flash and wanted to do good deeds, the consequences he faces from it is that he gets his life made a living hell even before he becomes that superhero. But yet, Barry Allen never quits being the Flash. He never stops trying to save people. Because at the end of the day, the Flash can say, well, I don't want to be the Flash anymore, and just quit being the Flash, and the Reverse Flash ceases to exist. But if he does that, he lets the Reverse Flash win. And even though he'll make himself have a better life, he will lose out on all the people he could have saved by being the Flash. So he has to endure the pain that no one else will endure. And the only one who's getting these repercussions is himself. So even though the Reverse Flash can do all of these villainous stuff, make the Flash's life just pure misery, it also helps him become one of the greatest heroes and one of the most iconic heroes of all time. Because no matter what the Reverse Flash does, the Flash will always get back up and never stop helping people. So even though people say pure villainous, cartoonishly evil villains are not complex like a Thanos and like all these other characters, we still get complexity and not the villains, but what they do for the heroes. So the complexity of these villains are not really associated with these characters, but the complexity they give to the heroes is kind of what makes them so great. Because if you don't have these pure evil villains to really push the boundaries and the morals of these heroes, then we won't really see the pushing points for most of these heroes. Because any other villain can be reasoned with, but when your morals are tested, that's when we know how truly good of a hero you actually are. But let me know down in the comments what you guys personally think about these pure evil villains, because I know a lot of people don't like these type of villains because they are not as complex as some other villains, but I see these villains as kind of hallmarks and kind of like main pivotal pieces to any character story, whether it be in comics or whether it be in regular movies, like in the Inglourious Bastards, where we see a pure evil villain and that villain is also done amazingly. So we can see that it also works in other versions, not just in comics. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Make sure to like and subscribe, because 99% of the people watching my videos aren't subscribed. Don't be that 99%. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Later, hater. Peace.